The marriage that once seemed picture perfect came crashing down when I discovered that my wife had been having an affair for over a year. My wife and I have been married since we were both 25 years old, and we are now 38. We first met while attending college, and after graduating, we tied the knot and began our life together. Things started on the right track, we both secured good jobs, and financially, we were stable. My wife worked in her father's small business, while I was employed at a large corporation. A few years into my career, my boss unexpectedly left the company, which left a gap that only I could fill. I had been the only one who really understood how our department worked, and because of that, I received a significant pay increase, my income tripled, and I got better bonuses and benefits. At 28, the same year we welcomed our first daughter into the world, I was earning much more than my wife. 2 years later, we had our second daughter. Thanks to her father's business and her talent, my wife was able to balance work in a flexible way, allowing her to be present for our children. Tragically, about 5 years ago, my father-in-law passed away quite suddenly. This left my mother-in-law and my wife in a difficult position, facing two choices: sell the business or take it over themselves. While my mother-in-law didn't have the expertise to run it, my wife stepped in and successfully took charge. Over time, she transformed from a regular employee to the head of the company, achieving remarkable success. This new role provided her with a substantial increase in her salary, exceeding mine. I was proud of her accomplishments, knowing that running a company is no small feat. However, with both of us working long hours, our daughters began to suffer from the lack of parental attention. After discussions between my wife and me, we decided that one of us should stay home to take care of the children. My wife argued that her company needed her more than mine did, so I made the decision to leave my job and become a stay-at-home dad. I took on all the responsibilities around the house: cooking, cleaning, running errands, and ensuring the girls were well cared for. I also made it a point to pamper my wife after her long days at work. For a while, this arrangement worked well. My wife appreciated everything I was doing. But about a year ago, things started to shift. She became distant and started making comments that cut deep, asking me if I even did anything or suggesting I should get a real job. It was frustrating because I worked hard every day to keep our home running smoothly and to support our family. I had a job, but I had chosen to prioritize our daughters and our home. Her sudden lack of affection was confusing, especially since she had always been attractive and engaging. She stopped taking the initiative for intimacy, and whenever I tried to bring it up, she claimed to never be in the mood. I thought she was overwhelmed by all the stresses of life, especially with everything going on in the world during the pandemic. Last weekend, everything changed. My oldest daughter had a softball game, and I wanted to capture those memories for my parents who live far away and don't get to see the girls very often. In my rush to get everything set up, I forgot my phone, so I asked my wife for hers. She had been glued to it throughout the day, so I thought it would be good for her to take a break. She handed me her phone and went off to get a drink. While I was recording my daughter's game, a notification popped up on her screen. Curiosity got the better of me, and I checked it. What I found was shocking: my wife was exchanging intimate messages and photos with a younger colleague from her work. They were discussing their physical encounters and making disparaging remarks about me, calling me a wimp for not having a real job. I felt my heart drop and my stomach twist in disbelief. A mix of devastation and anger washed over me. As I heard my wife approaching, I quickly closed the app and returned to recording. Once we got home, she tried to engage me in conversation, but I was far from interested. Later that night, as we settled into bed, she attempted to initiate intimacy for the first time in a while. I turned her down, still reeling from what I had discovered. In response, she told me that if I was going to act this way, I could sleep on the couch. I got up and moved to the couch, and I have been here ever since. Now I find myself at a loss, unsure of how to navigate this uncharted territory. My wife, who was once my partner and my love, has become a stranger, and I don't know where to begin to address what has happened. I find myself at a loss, not knowing where to begin. My wife meant everything to me, and my daughters are my whole world. Now, it all feels like it is slipping away, and I desperately need some guidance. Any advice would truly be appreciated during this tough time. I should mention that I've sent screenshots of our conversations to my phone. I have the evidence I need. I've had a chance to read through the suggestions given to me, and I want to express my gratitude for the support. Firstly, I do have all the text messages, pictures, and videos as proof. Secondly, when it comes to our business, it's a 50-50th split between her and my mother-in-law. Thirdly, I can no longer sleep in our bed. I've been staying in the guest bedroom every night, and that's where I plan to continue staying. The decision to file for divorce has already been made. This morning, I reached out to a law firm in a nearby town to keep things quiet and avoid drawing attention. Fortunately, they had an opening due to a cancellation, so after dropping off my daughters, I drove over for a consultation. The lawyer I met with turned out to be very knowledgeable. I shared all the evidence I had, and he reassured me that, given my situation, I was in a strong position for the divorce. Since I quit my job to raise our girls and my wife is often absent due to her affair, the lawyer indicated she would likely face significant challenges. It appears that she would not only lose in terms of custody but would also be responsible for child support and alimony. I would retain ownership of the house, which she would need to help pay for as long as our daughters live there. The lawyer suggested that, considering my current lack of employment, we might even be able to pursue additional financial support for my education, in order to secure a job in the future. He advised me not to seek employment until after the divorce is finalized. Since I am the husband, having a job now could undermine my position in the case. When he asked about custody, I expressed that I have no issue with my wife seeing our girls occasionally on weekends, but I do want to pursue full custody. He agreed that her actions, having an affair in our home, could definitely impact custody arrangements. He mentioned that bringing a stranger into the home and exposing our daughters to that situation puts their welfare at risk, and could be a factor in establishing my case for full custody. The plan is for her to have limited visitation, maybe only once or twice a month, with a strict rule that no men can be around my daughters. If I find out about any such situations, there will be consequences. The lawyer instructed me to keep everything under wraps until the divorce paperwork is ready. He emphasized the importance of remaining calm and not engaging in any arguments. He told me to continue to act normally and to sleep in the guest bedroom, avoiding any intimate interactions. I agreed to follow his advice. After returning home, I began preparing dinner and acting as if everything was fine, keeping the peace until she is formally served next week. I appreciate all the suggestions and even the tough love I received. To the individual who inquired about my wife's bears, it seems that simply asking her could lead to a quick response. It doesn't appear to be a complicated matter. Additionally, the lawyer recommended that I get tested for STDs and also suggested a paternity test for my daughters. This was hard for me to process and scared me quite a bit. As a brief update, I have been feeling down and things have been challenging lately. I've talked to my lawyer about posting updates, and while I can't share too many details, I was advised to keep my posts brief. For the quick update, I did manage to get tested for STDs and also arranged for a paternity test for my daughters. Thankfully, the results came back negative, which has brought me some relief amidst everything else going on. I recently received some good news regarding my health. I am relieved to report that I do not have any diseases. This clarity is a weight off my shoulders, especially regarding my role as a father. Many of you may be wondering about the results of the paternity test concerning my two daughters, and I want to assure you that regardless of the test results, I will always be their dad. I am indeed their biological father, and I have never felt happier to have that confirmation. It's strange to think that I had to question this at all, but here we are. As for my current situation with my soon-to-be ex-wife, she has moved out, and I have been granted full temporary custody of our daughters. This new arrangement came about through careful legal procedures set up by my lawyer to ensure a smooth transition of custody. Although the process wasn't easy and had its share of challenges, it's essential to focus on my children's well-being right now. My soon-to-be ex-wife was served with divorce papers at her workplace, which, from what I understand, was quite dramatic. However, I prefer to keep the specifics of that situation private for the time being. My daughters are aware of what is happening, especially my oldest, who understands that we are separating. It's been tough for her, particularly because one of her friends is going through a similar situation with her parents. She has witnessed the emotional fallout and is understandably upset about the possibility of our family breaking apart. I've seen her in tears, pleading with me to let their mother come back home. I know that my youngest simply misses her mom, and it hurts to see them both in pain. There are moments when I feel like I'm failing as a father, and I worry that they might resent me for the changes in our family. It leads me to consider awful thoughts, like whether I should just overlook their mother's infidelity to keep our family intact for their happiness. I can't bring myself to allow that to happen, though. I sometimes think about the idea of an open relationship, where we could wait until our daughters are older to sort things out. But I recognized that this wouldn't truly work and that the girls would sense the lack of love between their mother and me. Currently, my ex-wife is living with her mother. My mother-in-law reached out to me and expressed a desire to meet, which I agreed to. During our conversation, she didn't press for details about the divorce but did plead with me not to take her granddaughters away from her. I assured her that she is a wonderful grandmother and that as long as she can separate our children from the issues between their mother and me, I have no problem with her seeing them. She was grateful for my understanding, and I appreciate that. My ex has been trying to communicate with me through phone calls and texts, wanting to discuss our situation. Following my lawyer's advice, we have set up a way to communicate that is monitored and strictly focused on matters concerning the kids. For the time being, it's best to keep things simple and centered around their needs. In recent updates, I spent Thanksgiving with my soon-to-be ex-wife and my mother-in-law. The main purpose of this gathering was to focus on the girls and ensure they felt some sense of normalcy during this difficult time. Before Thanksgiving, I had a productive meeting with my mother-in-law where we discussed how to ensure a smooth transition for my daughters during this period. She shared some insights about my ex-wife's past relationships, revealing that she had been hurt by a high school boyfriend. According to her, this boyfriend was someone her family had warned her to avoid, but it seems my ex didn't heed that advice. My mother-in-law recounted a troubling incident where my ex-wife caught him in a compromising situation, which left her in disbelief. She told me about her concerns and emphasized how much she wished things could have been different. She expressed her sorrow for the pain her daughter has caused and reassured me that she would do her best to prevent any further complications during the divorce process. A few days before Thanksgiving, my mother-in-law invited me over for dinner with the girls. However, I made it clear that I wouldn't be comfortable if my ex-wife would also be present. She understood my concerns and assured me that we could find a way to celebrate the holiday that would be suitable for everyone involved. Maintaining the focus on my children during these gatherings is my top priority as we navigate through this challenging time. I cannot be with her right now. She expressed that she understands my situation, but she also requested if we could celebrate the holiday one more time together for the sake of our daughters. She acknowledged that I have a lawyer and suggested that I consult them about this idea. If they deemed it a bad idea, she said she would understand. I followed her suggestion and spoke to my lawyer, who advised that I communicate with my wife through the app, emphasizing that this gathering was solely for our daughters to prevent any misunderstandings. I did as instructed. Previously, she had reached out to me about coming over, pleading to see me and to spend time with the girls. The girls have been longing to reunite with their mother as well. I set aside my personal feelings for the sake of my daughters and agreed to the visit. Upon arriving, the atmosphere was uncomfortable. My soon-to-be ex-wife gave our children hugs and tried to embrace me as well, but I avoided her gesture and instead opted to hug my mother-in-law. Throughout the dinner, my soon-to-be ex-wife attempted to interact as if we were still a couple, engaging me in conversation. My responses were short, consisting mainly of yes or no, as I helped my mother-in-law with dinner preparations and cleanup. Given her religious beliefs, my mother-in-law wanted to say a prayer before the meal, and despite identifying as an atheist, I participated out of respect for her. I held my daughter's hand during the prayer, and when my wife attempted to grab my hand as well, I instinctively pulled away. Dinner proceeded, with my soon-to-be ex-wife continuing to act as if we were still a family, discussing holiday plans and vacations. It became increasingly clear to me that coming over was a mistake. After finishing dinner, I quickly cleaned up, attended to my daughters, and prepared to leave. They expressed a desire to watch a movie with their mother, as we used to do, which I allowed. However, when my soon-to-be ex-wife tried to snuggle up next to me on the couch, I chose to sit in a chair instead. Throughout the evening, my mother-in-law exhibited visible disapproval of my wife's behavior, giving her disapproving glances. When the movie wrapped up and it was time to leave, my daughters had fallen asleep. I picked them up and carried them to the car. After grabbing a few belongings, my soon-to-be ex-wife unexpectedly grabbed onto me, tears streaming down her face as she begged to work on our relationship. She expressed a strong desire to reunite as a family and expressed remorse for past actions. Before I could respond, my mother-in-law intervened, physically grabbing her by the hair and firmly telling her goodnight while proceeding to scold her. I later shared this entire incident with my lawyer, emphasizing that nothing in our interaction indicated a desire to reconcile. My wife has since attempted to reach out multiple times, pleading for a second chance, but I have decided to leave those messages unread. My focus remains solely on discussing matters concerning the girls, and I anticipate they will want to see their mother for Christmas, though I am uncertain if I can manage that. I will once again consult my lawyer for guidance. As for the updates on my daughters, things have taken a serious turn. They had 2 therapy sessions this week. The first session went well, with my daughters coming out feeling more at peace and calmer than usual. After that meeting, I spoke to the therapist, who seemed to have a good understanding of my daughter's needs. However, the second session proved to be a difficult one. The therapist explained, in terms that were appropriate for their ages, the reason behind their parents' separation, highlighting that their mother had been unfaithful and had betrayed me. While I anticipated this conversation would eventually take place, I was not prepared for it to occur so quickly. When I went to pick up my daughters, they were overwhelmed with emotions, bursting into tears and climbing all over me, expressing their love for me. Although I am grateful for their affection, it pains me to see them in such distress, as this is not the outcome I had hoped for. I inquired with the therapist regarding her decision to tell them about their mother's infidelity. She explained that the girls were already aware of the separation and had sensed a change in how I interacted with their mother. According to her, children are perceptive and understand more than we often give them credit for. They wanted clarity about the reasons behind our separation. The therapist indicated that for my daughters to progress in their therapy, they needed to be informed about the truth surrounding the situation. While I won't elaborate on the details of what was communicated to them, I can confirm that it was age-appropriate. However, they are now aware, in a suitable way for their understanding, that their mother had been unfaithful during our marriage. I believe that my oldest daughter might be able to cope with the situation and handle things okay, but my youngest definitely cannot. When we returned home, my girls clung to me tightly, visibly upset and crying throughout the night. It was heartbreaking to see them in such distress. To help soothe them, I decided to order their favorite food and put on some of their go-to movies in my bedroom. We all settled in, and I hoped that the familiar comfort of their favorite films would ease their anxiety. Eventually, they fell asleep beside me. However, after they were asleep, I took a moment to collect myself in the bathroom, where I couldn't hold back the tears. The reality of the situation was overwhelming. My soon-to-be ex-wife seems completely unaware of the emotional turmoil she is inflicting on our daughters. Navigating through this is proving to be incredibly challenging. When we visited the therapist, she suggested that we could explore the option of medication to help my daughters adjust to this new chapter in their lives. I was hesitant and ultimately refused this idea, as the therapist supported my decision. She clarified that medicating the girls would only be an option if needed, and that they would require a visit to their primary doctor for a proper diagnosis. I believe in handling my daughters' emotions naturally and healthily, prioritizing their emotional well-being. Fortunately, I don't have to stress about the upcoming Christmas holiday, as my daughters have expressed strong feelings against their mother. My oldest mentioned that she never wanted to see her mother again, and my youngest tends to follow what her sister says, though she might actually share those feelings deep down. I was taken aback when I heard my oldest express such hatred. I tried to reassure her, reminding her that while she might be angry, she didn't genuinely hate her mother, pointing out that their mom loves and cares for them. In response, my oldest firmly insisted that her mother does not love her, and she cried into my arms until she finally drifted off to sleep, followed shortly by my youngest. This has become our new normal. An update on our situation reveals that the girls are gradually feeling better. They continue to see the same therapist and have started to come to terms with their emotions. They have explicitly stated that they no longer hate their mother, but they've made it clear that they do not wish to see her for an extended period, which reflects their feelings and the boundaries they need. My wife has been informed of their sentiments, and although she initially tried to reach out to them, she has since shown more respect for our boundaries. It seems that she is beginning to grasp the impact of the situation. On another note, regarding the other person involved in this situation, I had suspicions about his character and was unfortunately validated in my thoughts. Someone had asked if there was an other betrayed spouse, which led me to investigate my wife's workplace. In my search, I stumbled upon a document that contained employee contact numbers. I found the number of the man involved with my wife and called it, only to discover it belonged to his wife. To my surprise, he was married and had a toddler. I relayed the information to her, but initially, she didn't believe me and hung up. However, a short time later, she called me back, requesting a meeting. We met up, and I shared all the evidence I had gathered. She requested to speak privately in my car, and as soon as we closed the door, she broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the betrayal. She repeatedly asked how someone could treat her this way and what she had done wrong. I reassured her that she had done nothing wrong and even provided her with my lawyer's contact information. As we discussed the timeline of her husband's infidelity, she transformed from sadness to anger, revealing her anguish as she yanked off her wig. She informed me that she had recently overcome cancer and had been through a lot over the past year and a half, including multiple surgeries and chemotherapy. Despite her struggles, she looked remarkably well. She shared how challenging it had been during her pregnancy and her battle with cancer, stating that it had been nearly 2 years since she and her husband had been intimate. After overcoming her illness, she had started to feel better but was still grappling with her self-image, feeling unattractive due to weight gain from medication and hair loss. She mentioned that she was finally at a stage where she could think about intimacy again and had planned a surprise for her husband in gratitude for his support during her illness. Now, that plan seemed shattered. As she expressed her fears about her child growing up in a broken home, I tried to console her. However, she then unexpectedly attempted to engage with me intimately. I firmly declined, explaining that it wasn't appropriate given her emotional state. She thanked me for my honesty and asked for all the evidence, which I shared with her before she headed home. Since then, we've exchanged a few messages as we both process what has happened, connecting over our shared experiences of betrayal and heartbreak. We are both busy with our lives but will keep in touch, and I want to take a moment to express my gratitude to the few people who reached out, inquiring about the OBS. Honestly, I hadn't even considered it until I received those messages. As for the recent holiday, Update 6 has prompted many questions about whether I celebrated Christmas with the OBS. Yes, I did, and it was a truly delightful experience that I will cherish. The entire day unfolded beautifully, and I made sure to lay out many presents from Santa for the girls. This year is significant because it might be the last time my oldest believes in Santa Claus, so I wanted to make it memorable. On Christmas morning, I woke up early while it was still dark outside, carefully arranging the presents. Within about 15 minutes after the girls woke up, they were filled with excitement, declaring that Santa had come. I reluctantly dragged myself out of bed, still feeling sleepy, and watched as they eagerly opened their gifts. Their happiness was contagious, and it warmed my heart. After the gift opening, I decided to put on a movie, which allowed the girls to snuggle up beside me, and they fell asleep almost instantly. Eventually, I got up to make some coffee, and shortly after, my youngest woke up and said she was hungry. I found an apron for her and let her help me prepare breakfast. It didn't take long for my oldest to join us, and we all sat down to enjoy our meal together. The girls played with their new toys afterward and had an absolute blast. Seeing them so happy brought me immense joy. Later in the evening, it was time for the girls to get ready to visit their mother and grandmother. Normally, I would be stricter about making sure they were prepared on time, but I have been more lenient recently due to everything that's been happening. When the girls expressed that they didn't really want to see their mom, I reminded them that their mother loves them. My therapist has advised me to encourage their relationship for their growth, and I also know that if I don't support this, my wife could use it against me in court. According to my therapist, the girls can decide how they want to manage their relationship with their mother as they grow older. My wife is aware of my sessions with the therapist, and they have talked. The therapist pointed out that my wife had betrayed me and emphasized that the girls seem to favor me. My wife will have a long way to go to regain their trust and love. I also advised the girls not to take their mother's actions out on their grandmother. They agreed and I took them over. The visit went smoothly. I called my mother-in-law when we arrived, and she came out to help the girls with their bags since they would be staying overnight for Christmas. Before I left, I checked with my lawyer regarding the sleepover. He confirmed it was okay, as long as it didn't happen too frequently or for extended periods. That night was fine, and I reassured the girls that if they wanted to come home at any time, all they had to do was call me. As I was leaving, my soon-to-be ex-wife walked out. I didn't catch what they said, but my soon-to-be ex had a confused look on her face as she spoke to my mother-in-law, who gave her a stern look in return. My soon-to-be ex then looked at me with tears in her eyes and waved, and I simply drove off. I had left some food in the oven, keeping everything warm for the OBS. When she eventually arrived, she didn't bring her toddler along. I asked about it, and she explained that her in-laws wanted to see the child for Christmas, just as I had done with my girls. She looked really nice, wearing a pretty dress, leggings, fluffy boots, and a lovely wig. We shared dinner and talked about our past, which allowed us to get to know each other better. After dinner, we moved to the couch and I turned on a movie. Our conversation flowed from our histories to our interests and the challenges we were currently facing. As we drank a bottle of wine, the mood lightened, and the atmosphere became more relaxed. I don't drink often, but I do enjoy having a specific wine on Christmas, and she asked if she could have some too. I checked to see if she was okay with it, and upon her affirming, I poured her a glass. As the night progressed, our conversation shifted from serious topics to laughter and jokes. We shared a couple of bottles of wine, which is unusual for me, and candidly discussed various subjects, including our desires and what we missed from our past relationships. It became clear that we had much in common in that regard. She commented that my wife was lucky but also made some mistakes, and I agreed, replying that her husband was in the same boat. Some of you suggested that I should affirm her feelings during this final attempt at connection, and I acknowledged that perspective as the night unfolded. I want to take a moment to acknowledge her recent attempts to connect with me. I must say that she is quite attractive, which is undeniable. However, when it comes to matters of intimacy, I found her approach somewhat inappropriate. I expressed my thoughts on this to her, and she seemed to understand where I was coming from. I suggested to her that if she felt uncomfortable, she could remove her wig, and made it clear that she looked stunning without it, especially with a pixie cut. She took my advice, removing the wig, and expressed her gratitude with a heartfelt thank you. As we continued discussing our feelings and preferences, the conversation naturally shifted toward more personal topics. Before long, we decided to immerse ourselves in a movie while cuddling. It is essential to note that we were both inebriated during this time. I recalled how my wife and I used to enjoy cuddling, and I remembered how my soon-to-be ex-partner found it comforting when I would rub her chest gently, somewhat like giving a massage. Initially, I did this out of habit, but when she mentioned how pleasant it felt, I was taken aback and immediately stopped, apologizing profusely for not realizing what I was doing. She assured me it was fine and even encouraged me to continue, as it brought her comfort and relaxation. I sought her confirmation, asking if she was sure she wanted me to keep going, and she replied affirmatively. As I resumed, I must admit that I felt a surge of arousal, which she noticed. To my surprise, she began to reciprocate by rubbing me as well. When I caught myself in a moment of shock, I apologized again, but she asked if I wanted her to stop. I reassured her not to feel obliged to halt if she didn't want to. She insisted that she wanted to continue, so we did so for a brief period. This intimate exchange escalated quickly. Before long, she leaned in to kiss me, and I responded in kind, giving in to the moment. This eventually led to her unzipping my pants, and the encounter quickly intensified. In a whirlwind of passion, we found ourselves moving from the living room to the kitchen and then to the office, engaging in more rough lovemaking before finally finding our way to my bed. There, we shared more tender and passionate moments, filled with slow and affectionate lovemaking. Once we reached the end of our encounter, we curled up together, both overcome with emotion, and eventually drifted off to sleep. The following morning, we had breakfast together before showering and preparing to leave. I took the opportunity to ask her if she had planned for our intricate night. She laughed lightly, mentioning that a girl always has an extra set of clothes just in case. Just as she was about to leave, she turned to me with a serious expression and asked if I felt anything during our time together. I decided to be truthful and told her that I indeed had feelings about the night we shared. However, I insisted that we needed to prioritize our well-being and that of our kids, ensuring these feelings were genuine and not fleeting. She agreed, indicating that we could explore these feelings further down the line. Just before parting, she gave me a sweet kiss on the cheek and thanked me for the wonderful night, saying she would text me later. Afterward, I went to pick up my daughters, and they pleasantly informed me that their mother had behaved well for the most part. Right now, I'm preparing dinner and looking forward to spending the evening with my girls. It's interesting how this online community has become a form of therapy for me, allowing for a level of expression I find helpful. As for updates, I've been quite busy lately, so this message will be brief. I understand why many might think this story is fabricated. The internet is filled with deceitful stories and attention seekers. Fortunately, my daughters are doing much better with the help of their therapist and various activities they have engaged in. They still experience some ups and downs, but overall, their well-being has improved significantly. Regarding my soon-to-be ex, she made several attempts to communicate with me in the weeks following Christmas, but those efforts have lessened considerably. She has now hired a lawyer, and my lawyer has informed me that our meetings are on the horizon. It seems she has come to terms with the fact that I am resolute in my decision, which has led her to understand that my mind cannot be easily changed. I anticipate that they will try to suggest reconciliation, but I have made it clear that this will not happen. Although she still reaches out occasionally through calls and texts, I typically leave those messages unanswered. On another note, I've learned that the ex-partner of my soon-to-be ex has been arrested. I won't go into too much detail at this time, but it seems he confronted her at work, leading to a verbal conflict that escalated. She threatened to involve law enforcement, which ultimately resulted in his arrest after an altercation where he allegedly assaulted her. She is pressing charges, and although I suspect he will seek legal counsel, I am out of the loop on any further developments. My mother-in-law mentioned this to me and offered that I could visit her. It appears that the confrontation left visible marks, such as a black eye and a busted lip. He may have blackened her eye and split her lip, but she calmly declared that karma has a way of working things out, and that this was her moment. Since the incident, my wife and our daughters have been absent from my life, except for this brief communication. Unless something drastic occurs, it is likely that I will remain quiet until after our initial meeting with our lawyers. Now, I want to shift to another significant event in my life. The second story involves discovering that my wife, who had been unfaithful, orchestrated a fake girls' trip to spend time with her male best friend. From the outside, everything in my life with my wife seemed perfect. We started dating in high school, and our relationship felt like a scene straight out of a romantic comedy. She was the bookish girl who preferred the library over social events, while I was the star athlete. Despite those differences, we fell for one another shortly after graduating college, leading us to marry and build our life together. We purchased our first home while still young, secured good jobs, and began to plan for a family. Fast forward 3 years, and we had one son and another baby on the way. During our high school years, one of my wife's friends always made me uneasy. It was clear he had feelings for her, but she always insisted he was just a nice guy. I tried to express my discomfort whenever she spent time with him, but our discussions often ended in arguments. Eventually, I decided to stop bringing it up. They frequently talked on the phone, exchanged text messages, shared memes, and had inside jokes that left me feeling excluded. Although he didn't attend the same college as us, he and my wife reconnected when we all moved back to our hometown. It turned out he was studying in the same field as her, and they ended up working at the same company. My wife didn't have many friends in high school, so when she made a bunch of friends at her new job, she was thrilled. She became very close with several women at the office, participating in brunches, attending theater shows, and even having sleepovers. I was genuinely happy for her because I knew she had been looking for a close-knit group of friends for a long time. Part of me thought this would mean she would spend less time with her male best friend. Last winter, I began to notice a change in her behavior. She seemed to interact with him less frequently, their conversations diminished, and he no longer came over to our house. I caught glimpses of him only occasionally when I visited her workplace. I hoped that she had moved on and their friendship was fading away. Then, one day, my wife excitedly told me that a group of the women from work was planning a girls' trip for the weekend. She assured me that it would be harmless fun, some wine, conversation, and relaxation with face masks. She left on Friday evening while I stayed home with the kids, genuinely believing that everything was fine. As Saturday evening approached, I found myself in bed, scrolling through Netflix for something to watch. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was my wife's male best friend, which struck me as odd since we had never really connected in any meaningful way. When I answered, I anticipated a brief exchange, but he didn't say anything at first. Just as I was about to hang up, I inadvertently overheard part of a conversation he was having with my wife. To my shock, he was expressing his love for her. My wife was on the other end, too. It soon became clear that wherever she had gone for this so-called girls' trip, he was there with her. I felt frozen in place, unable to end the call. I listened as she confided in him, expressing her regret about what had occurred a few weeks ago and stating that their rendezvous the previous night was a mistake. She had gone with the intention to talk things through and end whatever had begun between them. In that moment, it struck me like a bolt of lightning, there had never been a girls' trip. These two had orchestrated a betrayal that I never saw coming. The heartbreak and disbelief washed over me as I continued to listen, unable to tear myself away from the painful reality of the situation. I could hear them kissing on the other end of the line, their laughter and stolen moments echoing in my ears. It felt surreal, and after what felt like an eternity of listening to a reality I never wanted to face, I hung up the call. I was in disbelief, grappling with the painful truth of what I had just overheard. A wave of nausea washed over me, twisting my stomach into knots, and the urge to scream was almost unbearable. But I couldn't let it out, I had to protect my children from this mess. At first, a strange thought crossed my mind. It seemed unusual for him to butt dial me at such a late hour. Yet, the more I pondered it, the clearer it became. People typically butt dial their most recent contacts, and it didn't add up that he would have accidentally called me. Deep down, I knew he had done it on purpose. He wanted me to overhear the intimate exchange, perhaps thinking it would hurt me, or maybe as an almost childish way to flaunt his new relationship. An hour passed, heavy with silence, until my phone buzzed with incoming messages. They were all from him, and as I looked down at the screen, my heart sank further. There were screenshots of their conversations, intimate pictures they had exchanged, and even a clip from a video he had recorded while they were away at the lake house. The shock was overwhelming. I hadn't anticipated being confronted with such raw evidence. Although it was the last thing I wanted to see, a part of me felt relieved that he had sent it. I decided not to respond, knowing he might believe he had won some twisted victory in our long-standing conflict that had persisted for a decade. But in truth, I was simmering inside, plotting my revenge against both of them. I knew deep down that getting them fired from their jobs wouldn't satiate my anger. It seemed too light a punishment for the betrayal I felt. When my wife returned that Sunday night, she couldn't even meet my gaze. The guilt was palpable, and rightfully so. By the end of the week, I knew she would only feel worse as the weight of her actions settled in. Maintaining a facade of normalcy was my priority, particularly for our children's sake. They had already been through enough turmoil, and I didn't want to add to their distress. However, I realized she didn't seem to care as much about their well-being as she should have. By Wednesday, I had managed to arrange a meeting with her boss, fully aware of the company's strict no-dating policy. I was certain that at the very least, they would both face repercussions for their misconduct. The situation became even more complicated when I received one of the images my wife's friend had sent me. It was a photo of them together in the break room. I had attended numerous company holiday parties in the past, so I recognized the setting. Her boss's expression turned to horror as she looked over the images, caught off guard by the betrayal of trust right under her nose. It was clear she recalled how she had enjoyed her coffee at a table where they had stolen their moments. I knew my wife well, and I was confident she was oblivious to the fact that her friend had provided me with all of this damaging information. When the truth about what had happened came to light, I knew she would want nothing to do with him anymore. His little power play had cost him any chance he had of being with her once our separation became a reality. As soon as I stepped out of the office, I watched as her boss stormed toward her friend, dragging him back into her office. I made my way over to my wife's desk, my heart pounding, and dropped an envelope containing all the evidence I had gathered, along with divorce papers. Her open office layout meant everyone could see when I served her those papers. I declared my intention to divorce her, raising my voice higher than usual as I told her that I knew everything about her affair with her friend. Women nearby raised their eyebrows, quickly looking away, pretending they hadn't heard the confrontation. My wife's face turned beet red, the embarrassment evident as I walked away, knowing that this incident could lead to her being fired. After that, I took our kids to my brother's house, where we stayed for several weeks while I searched for a new apartment. The divorce became official, but we were still navigating custody hearings regarding our children. We had agreed on joint custody, but the biggest hurdle was establishing the holiday schedule. Both my wife and her friend were fired from their jobs, and I learned that she had cut ties with him completely. She moved back in with her mother, and I sold the house, which meant I got to keep the memories of the life I had built before all of this turmoil unfolded.